We always enjoy the Notre Dame football talk with Brian Driscoll from Irish Breakdown, and the spring game is upcoming this Saturday, so we've got much to get to. Brian, what's going on today?
Well, today, obviously, Notre Dame can never just have a nice, simple, easy process. There's always got to be something that comes up. And today it was the announcement that Tyler Buchner would not play because of an ankle injury he suffered while walking down the stairs. So it's always something with Notre Dame, which is good because it keeps me busy and keeps me in business. But he won't play. But other than that, everything's going well. Notre Dame getting ready for the spring game. Haven't had a ton of injuries new injuries in the spring. At least not any that were major other than Aiden Kanahana. But I always look forward to these games. And they had a really cool thing today, Mark. I don't know if you saw this, but they had a draft. So the veterans and captains and those guys, they did a blue gold versus team. They did one position at a time, which was a lot of fun. And you had coaches on one side, one team on the other. So that was a lot of fun. That was a new thing for Notre Dame. But other than that, it's just recruiting and getting ready for the spring game.
Well, Brian, I'm glad that you clarified walking down the stairs because the only thing I saw out there was non-football related ankle injury. And I thought, you never know. I'm not going to speculate, but you never know.
Don't worry. 75 people in our chat today speculated on it when we brought it up. And it was look, sometimes, you know me, Mark, I'm not someone who just believes what the man tells you, so to speak. But Notre Dame gave a very specific explanation of what happened. And knowing Marcus Freeman and even Brian Kelly, if it was something nefarious, they would have been he just had a non-football related injury. Coach Freeman was very specific. He was walking down the steps. He missed a step towards the end and he twisted his ankle. I don't think, from what I know of him, even Brian Kelly, who, I'm not a huge fan of, they wouldn't have given some made up story if it was he was, the joke I said today in our show, which I think people got a kick out of, and this is going to start some rumor. It's not like he did it hopping a fence after him and some teammates robbed a bank, right? It wasn't something like that. I don't think they would have given they just sort of said, hey, look, it was a non-football injury and let's move on. But they gave a very specific answer. And I buy it. And talking to some of the sources I have around the team, it sounds like it was something dumb. Not dumb as he did something dumb, but just seriously, you're gonna get injured doing that, right? Something you do every single day, and that's that's what it was.
Yeah, not running away from Ohio State or Clemson defenders on the field.
Or cops. Or anything like that, right? We've seen that before. Notre Dame quarterback get in trouble because he was running from the cops. Wouldn't be the first time that happened.
Yes, we've got another player in Oklahoma, former famous quarterback there, who's certainly had his his situations running from the cops, and he's going to be honored this Saturday as well. So, yes, it's happened.
Yeah.
All right, so it opens up opportunities for Drew Pine. Can you give us an idea of how much of an opportunity? We know that the reps are coming his way for a lot of people to see, but do you think it's significant?
Sure, I think it's significant. I think when you look at Tyler, the fact he has missed a season with a knee injury in the past, and he is a running quarterback, even if Tyler wins the job, Drew Pine needs to show that, hey, I'm capable of running this team if that opportunity comes. And from everything we've heard from our sources, Tyler has outplayed Drew consistently through the spring, and I think this is an opportunity for Drew to end the spring on a positive note. He's had a bit of a rough spring from what our sources have told us. So I think anytime you get a chance to, hey, look, I'm going to answer the bell every day, right? I'm not banged up. I'm not hurt. And you finish that spring on a strong note. He's going to play on both teams. He's going to play on the blue team and the gold team because they're just, quarterback limitations. If he plays well, I think it helps him. And not that it's he's here and then all of a sudden he jumps Tyler Buchner because of the blue gold game. I don't care enough about the spring games to think that's true. Neither does anyone else that I know of put that much value on a spring game. But it doesn't mean he can't, maybe close that gap a little bit with a strong performance. And, the fact that he is answering the bell and Drew's going to battle. I mean, he's a competitive kid. He's going to give you the best he's got, or at least he's going to play as hard as he can. And this is just another opportunity to show himself. And it's one that Tyler doesn't get, unfortunately.
So based on what you've outlined for us in the past and based on what I've seen with my own eyes, watching both quarterbacks play some significant snaps against big opponents last year. Well, Tyler Buchner's the favorite, and he is the favorite of fans for obvious reasons. He's got the ceiling. He's the guy that can tap out at a high level. to provide that kind of game-changing ability at quarterback, where Drew Pine, as you've stated, makes the right decision, goes to the right read, does the right things, takes care of the football, but there are limitations there. So is it concerning to you? You want to be in a situation where you go into the season and you feel confident with both guys, but you go with a more talented player because he's making the right decisions and being a leader on the field. But Pine not having a good spring, even though he shouldn't be on the field, you never know, and kind of questioning his ability once he gets on the field if he's called upon.
I think the issue with Drew this spring has been he's pressing. I think he's in a quarterback battle, and he knows what we all know. I mean, Drew's a smart kid. He watches Tyler Buckner play and is like, that guy can do things I can't do. And I think what that has caused is Drew to press a lot, because he's been, from what I've been told, turning the ball over more. And that's not Drew Pine's game, right? And so, I think that Drew has to kind of say, hey, look, you can't out Tyler, right? You'd have to just manage the offense. You have to rely on the fact that you are a game manager in the traditional encouraging sense, not the insult, like, you say it as an insult to a guy, right? Like, you need to be that point guard quarterback, right? Where, you just get it where it needs to go, let your teammates do the rest. And I think that Drew kind of got out of that a little bit this spring from talking to sources, trying to do too much, trying to be a playmaker when that's just not his game. So hopefully this game allows him to settle down on that. But he's going to have to realize, like, you are not going to beat Tyler out by being something that you're not. You have to be the best version of who you are. And I think that's what Drew needs to do. But the end of the day, both of these quarterbacks still have a lot to prove. And I think that, as you mentioned, Tyler's the guy that I think gets that nod right now, because he's not a finished product by any stretch, but he's the kind of kid dynamically with his arm and his legs can go out and make plays. Drew needs to be surrounded by great players. And I think that's where a lot of my optimism comes with Drew, Mark, to be honest with you, is I think this is going to be a very talented Notre Dame offense, assuming it's healthy. I mean, that's going to be the big key. They have a very thin margin for error from a talent standpoint. They can't afford to lose receivers in the fall the way they have for the spring, right? Because of the margin for error. They're very loaded at running back. Their offensive line should be excellent again. They have, in my opinion, the best tight end in the country, at the very least one of the 2 or 3 best tight ends in the country, a very talented tight end room. So I think there is a place for a quarterback to just to say, run the offense, get the ball where it needs to go. And we saw that in the bowl game with Jack Cohn, right? There's a lot of weapons to throw the ball to. Just make the right decision, get the ball out, let those playmakers go make plays. I mean, Jack Cohn had a 50-yard touchdown on a ball that went 2 yards past the line of scrimmage because he just got the ball out to Chris Tyree and go let him do his thing. And I think that's where Drew can thrive. It just, he has to eliminate some of the mistakes that he's had this spring and just trust himself, trust the offense, play within himself, and he'll be fine.
We talk Notre Dame football with Brian Driscoll as much as we can get him on here because he knows his stuff and can really break it down. Irish Breakdown is your place to be, right here on YouTube or on your favorite audio platform. So I'm sure if we talk to you on Sunday, there's going to be a guy or 2 or 5 that are going to pop up that weren't everybody's on your radar. I know that, but not necessarily somebody you're honing in on. But as it stands right now, going into Saturday, we'll stay with the offense. Who are you looking for, whether that's specific players or units or a narrative or what that is?
Unit narrative kind of goes together for me, Mark, and it really comes down to, I mean, you know this, right? You're not going to look like your September, October, November version on April 23rd. And that's not the expectation. But I do think there are some things that you can get from it. And when you look at the overhaul that we've seen on the offensive line with Harry Heastand coming in, with Chris Watt coming in, with Jeff Quinn moving out, there's an expectation that the offensive line is going to start to look like it did under Harry Heastand. And not so much from the standpoint of, you've got Quentin Nelson's and the Mike McGlinchey's, but those lines were known not just for great players, but also they play with great fundamentals. They play with great technique. They play with power and physicality and toughness, things that have kind of been lacking for much of the last 4 years, with one exception. That was 2020 when it was Chris Watt's only year as the GA. He's back as the GA. He obviously played under Harry Heastand. So there's a level of expectation that this line is going to get back to being what it used to be. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to miss blocks. There's going to be those type of technical mistakes, which I'm not concerned about. But what I need to see on Saturday to feel like this line is progressing is the toughness, the moving their feet through contact, using their hands and getting a push and really battling and competing, something we didn't see a lot of last year. For me, offensively, that's my number one takeaway. And then number two is, are there going to be some young guys that step up, Mark? Like you mentioned, there's always a kid every year that nobody's ever heard of, or we've heard a little less about, or maybe we've heard a lot about another guy and somebody else steps up late, like a Jadarian Price at running back, or an Audric Estime. Chris Tyree, Logan Diggs get a lot of the oxygen in that position, but can an Audric Estime or a Jadarian Price kind of break out and finish good springs with good spring games? Can Deion Colsey kind of take that next step as a player and end his spring on a positive note? Those are the kind of guys skill-wise that I look for. I don't care what Lorenzo Styles does in the blue gold game, Mark. I mean, if he has 8 catches for 120 yards, like, okay, great. He did that in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State, who had one of the top 10 pass defenses in the country last year. Like, if he catches one ball for 2 yards, I don't care, right? We know what he can do. They need somebody like a Deion Colsey, who is an unproven player, who has only 4 career catches, to step up and say, he can help us now too. He deserves to be in that rotation. I think those are the storylines I care more about from a spring game than, oh, gee, Chris Tyree's still fast, or hey, guess what? Michael Mayer's still really good. Those are the things that you just kind of assume and you're ready for. I don't need Braden Lindsey to do anything. I need those other guys to kind of show us and give us some optimism that they may have a chance to help out in the fall.
Well, I hate to follow the template, but I'm just going to take the same question and turn it over to the defense and say, what are you looking for?
It was such a great question. I mean, why mess with a good thing? I think defensively, it's going to come down to, the first thing I'm looking for is the secondary, right? And there's a lot of young players that are sort of emerging. Last year, you look at the safety position, and I'm going to say something that on the face of it sounds absurd, but even without Kyle Hamilton, Notre Dame's safety position right now looks a lot stronger than it did this time a year ago. And the reason is last year you had Kyle Hamilton and a bunch of question marks. Well, since then, Kyle Hamilton's gone, but Brandon Joseph has transferred in from Northwestern. He was an All-American 2 years ago. But, also since last spring, Ramon Henderson has moved to safety after beginning a corner. Xavier Watts has moved to safety. He was a receiver this time a year ago. So even though you don't have that one elite Kyle Hamilton type, Brandon Joseph is very good. He's not Kyle Hamilton. It's more of, now you've got a second, a third, and a fourth, plus you've got the veterans like you had last year with Houston Griffith and DJ Brown. So just the depth is better there. The experience is better there. Now we need to see if they can make plays. And then at cornerback, you had 3 freshmen last year that came in, and Ryan Barnes, Philip Riley, and Chance Tucker. They need to challenge the guys that are coming back. Cam Hart's not going to play in the game on Saturday. He's had an outstanding year last year. He's dealing with an off-season shoulder injury. So it's provided those young corners with a chance. And, first 6 or 7 practices, we heard that the offense is dominating. Last 4 or 5 practices, we've heard, boy, the secondary has really made big strides. So I want to see that for myself, right? I want to see that Ryan Barnes is showing that, hey, I can be a guy that can help you win next year. I want to see Philip Riley and Chance Tucker go out there and play and, stick with some of those receivers and show the ability to show the proper footwork and play the ball downfield and those type of things. And so those, obviously, that's the first thing that I'm going to be looking at. I don't care what Isaiah Foskey does on Saturday. We know he's going to be a stud. I don't really care about some of those other things. I really want to see the secondary, because when you think about that first matchup of the year, right, that's going to determine whether or not Notre Dame's going to have a chance to be in that game and maybe pull off an upset. But more importantly, just be in the game. Is, can your secondary keep Ohio State in check enough to allow your offense to win the game, right? Like that was the template last year. That's what Oregon State did. That's what Michigan did. They gave up their yards and they gave up their plays, but they made enough stops in the secondary that they could then outscore Ohio State offensively. Because that's the thing I've said to Notre Dame fans. Look at Ohio State's 2 losses last year. They scored 28, 27 points. You're not going to beat Ohio State 20-17, right? So, but can you make enough plays? And that's the area where I think most people would look at this matchup and say, front 7-wise, Notre Dame should be able to compete with Ohio State, if not outplay them in the front 7. But that secondary matchup is really problematic. And so obviously that's the group that I'm looking to see how they compete against some talented players.
And those 28 and 27-point performances were actually offensively better than that, but they couldn't get off the field defensively, so they're standing on the sideline for 7-minute drives watching their rush defense give up chunk play after chunk play after chunk play. So they were racking up like 650 yards against Oregon, but couldn't get on the field. So
right, but only had 4 scores, right? Because like in a game, my point is this, Mark, is in a game, like if Ohio State gets 6 possessions, they can score 42 points on you. right? I mean, that's the thing, is they made enough stops against Oregon, and Michigan was able to hold them to some field goals and some things like that, to where you can outscore them, because you're not going to beat them 20-17, right? You're going to have to outscore them. But if you go into Columbus and they're just 7 first series, 7 second series, 7 third series, you're going to get beat. And that's going to be the key is, hey, you give up the 40-yard pass, but tackle them at the 15 and then have a red zone stop and make them kick a field goal, right? Those are the things that are going to be key, and not just let them just beat you down the field, down the field, down the field. Because if that happens and you get into a shootout where it's going to look like the Rose Bowl, you're not going to win. Because, I mean, look, Utah showed that. You can jump on a 14-0 and Ohio State can come back on you just like that. You've got to be able to make some stops, and your secondary's got to be able to make some plays. And that's the area that you look at in that matchup and say, if that group doesn't play better than they did in big games last year, it's going to be tough for Notre Dame to feel like they can go in there and win that game. You're going to have to win a shootout at that point. And Ohio State doesn't lose very many of those.
Brian, I don't want to pin something on you that you didn't say, but I saw this the other day on Twitter, and I don't remember if this came from you. Is the point spread on that game 13?
I'm not sure. I don't do the point
spreads.
Okay. I've heard 10.5. Somebody told me it was 10.5. Somebody told me it was 13. I don't know if it started at 13 and went to 10.5, or started at 10.5 and went to 13. I'm not a betting guy. That's not really my thing. But yeah, I do know it's been double digits since the first line came out.
Okay.
Which I understand. I mean, let's be honest about something, Mark, right? In big games for Notre Dame, with the exception of a couple Georgia games and a Clemson game when they didn't have Trevor Lawrence and 3 of their best defensive players, Notre Dame is not competitive in these type of games, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. So if Notre Dame wants to not continue to be disrespected in these big games, which is what they say, then hey, guess what? Don't lose to Miami 41-8, right? Like, don't go to Michigan 2 years ago and get smacked, right? And that was Brian Kelly's legacy to me, was 3-17 against top 10 teams. You can talk about 113 and 39 all you want. I don't care that you beat you've won 50 straight games against unranked teams. I care that what did you do against the best teams? And if Notre Dame wants to stop being 10-point underdogs on the road against top teams, then start showing up in some of these games. And I think that's what a lot of Notre Dame fans are excited about, is that, it is a new era. And is Marcus Freeman going to be able to go out and show that it is a different time, and it is a different era. Whether they win or lose, they're going to compete. And that's been Marcus Freeman's biggest mantra this whole spring, is we're going to compete every single day. We've had recruits tell us, like, we went to practice, and as soon as they got out of stretch, they went right to one-on-ones. I mean, just right to competing against each other. And that's way different than what we've seen in the past. And I think it just speaks to that, hey, I don't care who we play, where we play, whatever, we're going to go there and we're going to give you the best that we got. And that's not something we've seen from Notre Dame in these type of games. So I know a lot of Notre Dame fans feel it's disrespectful. We finished ranked higher than Ohio State last year. Whatever. Stop losing these games by 30, and people stop making you double-digit underdogs when you go on the road and play these games. I mean, that's just – I'm a Notre Dame fan, cover Notre Dame, but that's all. I'm also someone that has objectivity and is pays attention to these things, right? Stop getting your butt kicked in these games, and you'll stop being an underdog.
Marcus Freeman is certainly competitive, and his coaching staff on the recruiting trail. 4-star wide receiver Braylon Davis jumps into the fold.
Braylon James.
Yes, Braylon James. Thank you very much for that. As Marcus Freeman goes down to Texas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was an interesting one, because receivers just been a hot mess for Notre Dame. I mean, you've got 4 scholarship receivers right now healthy during the spring, and they're at most going to be at 7 of recruited scholarship guys. So, like, not walk-ons that got scholarships. They're going to be at 7 when Tobias Merriweather shows up and guys get healthy. So receivers big in this year, Mark. I mean, they're going to need at least 3 guys, and they're going to need some guys who can kind of come in and play early on. Braylon James, we think, is that guy. Listed over 6'2". Some people list him 6'2", 6'3". He's over 180 pounds. Had a chance to kind of look at his results from a March combine he was at down in Dallas. He ran a 4.47 electronically, had a 38+ inch vertical, 130+ inch broad jump. Really has turned recently ran a 13.9 in the 110-meter hurdles, which is a pretty good time from what I'm told from some of my track friends. I couldn't tell you if that's necessarily a good thing, but good time. But that's my friends that coach track tell me. But he adds some size and some explosiveness, great ball skills, and he's a guy that I think can come in and somewhat early in his career help him out. And they just need more dynamic players, and he's a dynamic player, and it's certainly a great way to kick off your 2023 wide receiver class, which is going to have to not only be big in numbers, but you need to add multiple impact players.
Make sure you head on over to Irish Breakdown, whether that be on your favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube, and check out Brian's work. It's exceptional on Notre Dame football. Sam Pendleton, he's a top 20 rated interior offensive lineman, and he's about to make his announcement known.
Yeah, on Monday at, I believe, 6:30 Eastern, he's going to live stream his decision. We'll carry it at Irish Breakdown, so we'll carry his live stream. He's going to decide between Notre Dame, Michigan, Florida, and NC State. How about that for a group of four schools, right? So you got two northern schools, a mid-Atlantic school, and a southern school. So he's an interesting kid, Mark, because his offer list didn't really start to blow up till January. He's a kid that kind of, as schools got on the road, Notre Dame didn't offer him till March 17th. So when Harry Hiestand got hired and he went on the road, immediately it was, let's go to the kids we've already offered and get with them. So they went and saw Monroe Freeling and Sullivan Absher and Samson Okunlola and Charles Jagusa and those type of guys, Austin Sarabel. And then after they kind of got off the road, it was, okay, now let's look for some other kids we like. And so they offered him in March and immediately made him a priority, had him on campus last week, did a great job impressing him and his family, and they've made themselves a contender for him. And I think Notre Dame, obviously we won't find out what the kid's going to do until Monday, but I think Notre Dame has done a pretty good job of putting themselves in a very, very strong position with him. But I know that Michigan has done good work with him. Florida, I believe, is his most recent visit of those schools. And of course, NC State's had him on campus a bunch. So, but this is a kid that Harry Hiestand, as soon as he identified him, went after him hard. And as you know, Mark, Harry Hiestand's a very hard guy to say no to on the recruiting trail.
Awesome stuff as always. Brian Driscoll gets it done there at Irish Breakdown. I would invite everybody to head on over there, whether you like Notre Dame or not. It's a fun listen. It's an informative listen. And if you want to think and interact about college football, that's the place to be. Awesome stuff. So game time for Notre Dame, Peacock Network, correct?
Yes, I believe it is a 12:30 game. I believe. I'll have to go look at that, but yeah, it's an afternoon game. It'll be on Peacock Network. I don't know if it's the free version of it or the pay version of it. I'm not quite sure, but
well,
yeah, they're really trying to push the Peacock. Yeah, what's that?
That is certainly key for me as to whether it's the paid or because I've got plenty of teams to track, but I would love to see the Notre Dame game before I got to catch it on YouTube later.
Yeah, I hope it's the free version, but who knows? But I'll be there in person and be there watching it. I'll be in the stands enjoying myself. But it's supposed to be a beautiful day on Saturday. We'll be out tailgating and relaxing, and then I'll head up to the suite to watch the game. And the big thing for me, Mark, is competitive, fun, and no more injuries. Like that to me, I remember, I mean, you remember this. Remember, there were Notre Dame fans, oh, Montgomery Van Gorder's out playing Deshaun Kaiser, who had a horrible spring. He's not going to be able to help them. And then, of course, the next year, Deshaun Kaiser comes out and replaces Malik Zaire and plays very well. So Nate Montana won a blue gold MVP Brian Kelly's first year. They're fun, and I like to see the compete level, but we all, and this is true of every spring game, we should all be very cautious of coming to too many broad sweeping conclusions from what we see in a spring. And like a lot of Notre Dame fans watch Clemson, like, oh, they're going to beat Clemson. Like, hey, they didn't have Jordan McFadden. List Brian Breezy didn't play in the game. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit on making sweeping conclusions about a spring game. Even if things look great on Saturday, I'll say the same thing. It's meant to be fun and enjoyable, and you love to see the compete level, but it's not something that we should say, well, Notre Dame's going to do this or they're not going to do that or whatever the case may be based on the spring game.
Thanks for the talk, Brian. It's always valuable, and we appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.